Happy Wednesday. We have been on a little vacation from Paul's letter to the church in Colossae, where we would be in the second chapter. I have been mostly, as you'll see, in Mark chapter 10, and just had some things that were a little bit more pressing to me or hot off the press, and decided to head down that path. So I'm going to read today Mark chapter 10, verses 35 to 45. So, and James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came up to him and said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." And Jesus said to them, "What do you want me to do for you?" You can just hear, oh boy, here we go. And they said, "Grant us to sit one at your right hand and one on your left in your glory." Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" And they said to him, "We are able." And Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink, you will drink, and with the baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand and at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared." And when the 10 heard it, they began to be indignant at James and John. Obviously, they hear, oh yeah, they were trying to cut to the head of the line, get all the glory and all of that. And Jesus called them and said to them, "You know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you, but whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever will be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." So I have been reading Andrew Murray's classic book, Humility and Absolute Surrender. Andrew Murray, 19th century pastor. He was in South Africa. Born in South Africa. His parents were missionaries there. He studied theological training back in Scotland. Other things, I guess he and his wife had 8 children, and he was sort of out of the early Pentecostal revivalist sort of camps. Wrote a number of books about the inner life, and perhaps the one that he's the most famous for is his book on humility and absolute surrender. And in the premise of his book, it's interesting because he argues that we often think of humility as being our response to our sin. But he says that's actually not the way to think about humility at all. Our humility ought to principally be in response to God and in response to grace. That we ought to be driven more to a humble posture, not because of our brokenness, our sinfulness, but because of who God is and because of grace. Those things ought to drive us to humility, and also Christ's example ought to drive us to humility. And then he talks at some great length about the need to elevate humility as sort of our highest goal and the thing that we think about all the time. And I actually, in my humble opinion, I think he's a little bit off in some of the things that he says about humility. So yes, I am finding myself wrestling with the fact that I'm reading this classic book on humility, and I think I have insights that are better than the author who wrote them. So I'm dealing with that, but I do think that he's a little bit off. But I come back to this to say, Murray has definitely impressed upon me the need to elevate and esteem humility and service, and to just take a simple look at some of these passages. So here in Mark 10, we have James and John trying to think that, following God is just sort of like everything else. If you're good at it, you ought to be promoted and get some glory out of it. And Jesus is saying, you do not understand how this works. And if you want to be great, you serve. If you want to be first, you go to the end of the line. and the way up is down. And there is a call to a humility that is freeing and liberating and very countercultural, and we find it in Mark chapter 10. Have a good day.